Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the City of Auckland for allowing me to be part of your discussions, and greetings from Ramsay Street. Soup was great. Who enjoyed it? I did. No. Lygon Street, you get coffee there, not soup. I've been actually trying to think how I can make my few stories useful to you. And but before doing that, I'd just like to say, having sat here this morning as a fleeting visitor to Auckland and listened to what you're doing, I just want to say congratulations. It's fantastic. I mean, the fact that you're all out there making a difference and caring, I think is just wonderful to hear. I'm one of those people who does probably spend most of their life sitting behind a desk these days, and probably one of those people who works on programs more than anything else these days, but I really appreciate your work. So I'd just like to tell you a few stories about what it's like at the City of Melbourne around this notion of community. And the first thing I need to explain to you is, unlike the City of Auckland is now, the City of Melbourne is only one of 31 municipalities within a greater metropolitan area. And its resident population these days is 105,000 people. In 1992 it was only 34,000 people, but its daily population is around, on average, 800,000 people. So the question arises, what is community for a municipality like ours, which is really a downtown destination place? And my council believes that all of those people are actually its community. Those who live there, those who work there, those who study there, those who conduct business there, are all of the community. And the council takes its planning approaches, its program approaches, to try and encapsulate all of that and do whatever it can actually to help mix it up. So that it is actually a living and working place, which I'd suggest is thriving, and you can see on these numbers, if nothing else, it's thriving through sheer growth on every factor. Now this is within 37.5 square kilometres. 800,000 people is roughly equivalent to 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 Victorians being in this small space for a variety of purposes, and growing. Some of the things that have happened which mightn't at first blush seem familiar to what you've been talking about this morning, but actually are, because you've been talking about issues, in my mind, of reclaiming space, of empowering people, of getting organised. Well, Postcode 3000 is an example of that, but through a very different means. And it came about from community-based planning in the early 80s that said it would be a good idea for the future of the CBD if people lived in it. Not a lot happened. Then there was a crash, and then the council actually got to work with a marketing campaign to make it possible to conceive of living in former retrofitted commercial buildings. And you can see the difference from the red dots on the map as a consequence of doing that. Over a relatively short period, the growth really started around about the early 1990s, and by 2002 you can see the consequence. And that has continued, and has continued to drive that overall residential growth. The consequence of that, these are two newspaper stories, one from the 80s, one from the 2000s, just reflecting the difference that people made once they began to live in what otherwise was considered a 9-to-5 environment. The other part of the story that went with that is that the City of Melbourne very much is a university town. It has two major university campuses within the municipality, in and close to the CBD, and the campuses of probably another 7 universities distributed around it. As a result, 40% of those residents are actually students, and 26% of them are international students. So they are a community with special needs, funnily enough, because they're a community who English may not be their first language, they may not know many other people, they may only be here for a short period, but there are probably two reasons they've come to Melbourne to study. One is the quality of the education, and the other is that it's a nice place to be. So part of our programs is actually making it possible for those people to engage. For example, Melbourne City Council runs a program at Melbourne Airport at the beginning of each semester to welcome students coming in, take their names, connect them to other people, actually give them some sense of being part of a community. There's a big welcoming event that's held in Federation Square for all those international students every year. And overall, the whole idea of Melbourne being a knowledge place is now celebrated in a weekly festival, which you can see advertised on top of the pub. Another example of community engagement, which I just bring to your attention, was an exercise called Future Melbourne that the council ran in 2007-2008. Council has a tradition of doing broad-based strategic planning every 10 years. This was time to refresh it, remembering the size of that community and the dispersal of that community. We thought this time it really wasn't something we could rely upon town hall meetings for. So for the first time we actually used the internet. And this was done with a series of interactive chat rooms, and then finally the draft plan was put onto a wiki and opened up to the world to edit in much the same way that you can edit Wikipedia. Overall, 16,000 people made a contribution. The plan has, as a result, stood up to the test of 2 elections. It's embedded into the council's sort of detailed programming and planning and resource allocation. And at some point it will also need to be refreshed again for the new issues, the new things that people want to contribute to. On the sustainability front, we have to tackle this issue at a very large level. A lot of what we have to tackle is to do with commercial occupations of the built environment, but there is also a very strong residential role to play in it. This picture is indicating the dimensions of that growth. The original CBD is the rectangle in the centre. It crossed over the river to South Bank. It's grown into the Docklands area, which is almost as big as the old CBD. And over the next 20 to 30 years, we're planning for it to grow even further to the west. So we're going to have to repeat that same downtown dimension of living and working and conviviality again and again. We were lucky with the first one because it was built off something that already existed. So there is going to be new places that will need to be created. The planning process for some of those has already started. It's going to take many years to get all of this right. There's going to be new communities that are coming into places like this who have to be supported to do that, initially with how you build it, and secondly how you provide the infrastructure to support them, plus the surrounding neighbourhood. All of these things are now in the planning. Just wanted to point out, and mention was made of Jan Gale earlier this morning. Jan Gale has also been to Melbourne on lots and lots of occasions and has become something of a mentor for our urban design people. Just some images here of, in the city centre, the attention that's paid to classy looking but highly robust and highly adaptable urban design so that people can make maximum usage of it for informal as well as formal purposes. An issue for us around this housing boom that we've experienced is all of it is apartments. There's no room for single houses anymore in our municipality. Apartment living is a relatively new phenomenon in Australia. Only really the last couple of decades has it been significant. And we're currently undertaking a review of whether the housing stock that's coming out is working well for the changing needs of the community. One thing that is starting to change now is that early on, a lot of that population were relatively itinerant, turning over every 5 years, probably due to the student effect, but also younger people coming in for a period of time and moving out. They're now starting to settle, and the clearest evidence of that is that the schools are all at bursting point in the immediate vicinity of the municipality, and the government has just agreed to build a new primary school just outside the municipality, but this is going to be a feature of downtown development into the future. Will be schools, and they won't look like the schools that we've had in the past, in that they will probably be vertical schools. They'll be existing in tower buildings. They won't be existing in low-level buildings in open space. There'll have to be different ways to access open space, but that one of those is now being planned, and there will be more. To support this growth, the council is investing in, for it, quite a lot of new community infrastructure. It's chosen, as I think somebody referred earlier, to hubs, to use the hub model of doing it, to co-locate community facilities. The keystone to all of these so far has been libraries. The biggest demand from our population has been for libraries, both for their basic function but also for the function that they play as a meeting space for people. Adding other facilities to those. The one that's in the top left is a new library under construction in the Docklands area, which is an indication that that is now becoming genuinely a mixed community. The sporting field that you see below that is also in the Docklands area. It's a futsal field. It's small, but it's an indication you can actually, in a high-rise downtown environment, create something that feels like you're out in the open. Docklands as a development, I think the only reason I'm showing you this slide is that in a downtown area, particularly one where you're building new, it's how you build can allow communities to be successful or not. And one of the issues that we've had with Docklands, which was initially driven by an authority, a development authority, without much council input, is that it has tended to create very large buildings in very large spaces. And what the council is now doing, that it is resuming authority, is having to go back in and fill in those spaces to make them more intimate, because nobody would use them. The bigger the space, the fewer the people, seems to be the way things go. So the only point is, if you're developing new communities, remember the intimate, not just the large. And these are some more views of Docklands. On the issue of intimate, we're also doing a community garden to enable that population to settle itself. You can see the wide open areas in here. These are all going to progressively have to be made more intimate with more uses, more human scale things that people can find their way through, nooks and crannies, not wide open Tiananmen Square type plazas, which just don't work. Last thing I'll just mention is, last two things I'll just mention is that one of the issues we have, which I think one of our early speakers also touched on, is how do you deal with communities in high-rise multi-units with a body corporate? And we're finding, as exactly your colleagues are, that there are difficulties in empowering people who live in that situation to make changes in their interest. And a lot of our development practice has actually not made it easier. I'm not sure whether it is here, but in Australia, individual apartments in a high-rise building would not have an individual water meter. Individual apartments probably don't have rubbish chutes where you can separate your rubbish at the chute point. So if you don't have an individual water meter, how can you respond when water restrictions are on? All of those sorts of things become difficult and stressful for people. So a lot of our programs now are starting to work out ways in which we can make it easier for people who want to make a difference to engage with their body corporates to bring their collective along, particularly in this area of sustainability and retrofitting. In a similar circumstance, we've been working with a community in a high-rise public housing estate which has been undergoing redevelopment. Nothing really different to what heard this morning from you. The only point here, I suppose, is that this redevelopment has included in it, on the building front, retrofitting to a more sustainable built environment. What the council has come in and worked with that community to give them the opportunity to take best advantage of that and therefore empower them so that they can determine how they may wish to live more sustainable lives within a setting that's provided to them to give them the capacity to do it. I'll stop there. I just wanted to tell you a few things, a few stories. Hopefully you can see through the size and the downtown nature of it that underlying it are still the same fundamental human issues that you're all dealing with, and I could only encourage you to keep on doing so. Thank you.